Today I'm going to talk about one of the most difficult subjects that I've ever talked about, and that is emotion. Um, One time St. Augustine was asked to explain his view on the word time, and he said, "If you don't ask me, I know what time is very well. If you ask me, then I can't tell you." And that's kind of the way it is with the word emotion. There's so much said about emotion, and it's used, you hear it almost every day in different ways, on television, and just in conversation. It's just a very common word, but it's a very difficult word. And it's become so important now that not only is it a part of psychology, but it's also become an area of sociology of emotion. It's become a part of philosophy of emotion, and even history. It's now a part, one of the areas that historians can focus on. So it's become an enormously important word. A lot of books, a lot of articles written on emotion. And I must say that I haven't read anything on emotion that I'm particularly impressed with or that I like. And it's not very likely that I'm going to say anything that is going to be very impressive. At the same time, it's an enormously important word, and it's a word that I use in my groups quite a bit. The thing about definitions is that definitions are words following words. Once we define a word, then we define the words that define the words, and so forth. So I'm not attempting to give a definition of emotion that's going to stand the test of time, but I do want to give some thoughts about emotion, why it's important, and what are some of the problems with it. First of all, the word emotion is motion. So it has to do with motion. That's part of what it's about. The French word émouvoir means to agitate or to stir up. Some of the most popular definitions of emotion that you read in the dictionary is simply feeling, intense feeling. Well, that doesn't say a lot because now you have to define what you meant by feeling, and then if you define that, then you have to define what you meant by those words. So it kind of goes in a circle. But the Latin term émouvoir means motion, to move out. So something happens. Emotion is not just simply some kind of a feeling that people have. I have a list of words that I talk about in some of my groups. I call enormously troublesome words, and emotion is one of them. The word happy is one of them. The word depression is one of those words. But at the top of the list is emotion. I think people have more problems with that word and wanting to focus on emotion instead of on thinking, which produces, of course, the emotion. So there's a lot that could be said about it. A lot of popular definitions. Just not long ago, I heard a TV evangelist say, "You must take emotion out of your decision making." Well, that's one of those very, very wrong concepts. You don't take emotion out of anything, certainly not out of decision making. Another one is, I heard a very well-educated person not long ago say that I was torn between my head and my heart. Now, heart is a good, that's a good used word. It's a good way of saying things, and we most of the time know what we mean when we say that, but it's still a metaphor, and we don't really think like that. The big one is, though, what I call the adjective problem. Any word that follows emotional, and we hear it constantly, is generally a wrong word. It's not going to make a lot of sense. Emotional day, there was an emotional meeting. She showed no emotion, as talking about someone in court. Or I heard a guy say not long ago, such and such happened and my emotion just took over. Well, it doesn't happen like that. That becomes an excuse. So emotion gets batted around like a ping pong ball. People think they know what it means. We use it constantly, and yet it's one of those words that's like Augustine's word time. It's very hard to nail down. So rather than try to give a definition of emotion, what I want to do is just give some suggestions about it and some things that might be helpful day to day. What I call some characteristics of emotion. One is it's intentional. Emotion is a choice. It's about something. We become angry about something or someone. It's not it's not something that we just kind of leave aside. We can't get rid of it. We have to have it, but it's not something that leads us around kind of by the nose. So emotion is it's intentional. It's also directional. We go in a certain way with it. If I am mad, I'm mad because of something that happened, or my way of viewing something that happened, or I am upset with a person because of such and such. So it's intentional, it's directional. It's also singular. Um, by that I mean this. We hear the term emotions, plural, S, emotions, as though we can make a list. And literally I have somewhere a list of emotions that I've collected over the years. And I have some 300 of what people would call emotions. And what I would like to say is that that gets us nowhere. We go in a circle with that because it all becomes the same thing. So I would want to say emotion should be thought of as emotion, singular. We can talk about all kinds of weather, but weather is still weather, whether it's hot, cold, or whatever. Emotion is simply one word. It's something that happens when we think. Not that we think all different emotions. We don't think different labels. We don't label thoughts. We just have thoughts. So we shouldn't try to label emotions in the same sense that we cannot label the thoughts. And another one that I think is very important is that we can use we can use metaphors to talk about emotion. In fact, we almost have to. Metaphors, a way of explaining something. The thing about emotion is, though, that if you can get by without it, then we should get by without it. If the metaphor was the same thing as whatever it's describing, then we wouldn't need the metaphor. But I'm going to use some metaphors, none of which are accurate. It's just a way of helping people in the group get a handle on what I'm trying to say. For one thing, emotion can be compared to pain. Imagine, for example, that a baby is born with no pain. There's a word for that. It's called congenital insensitivity. It's a very bad thing. If you're born with no pain, usually you don't live very long. You're going to have problems until you, as long as you live. We have to have pain, not too much. We need to learn how to deal with it and how to control it, but we have to have pain or we wouldn't know what's going on within our bodies. So emotion is like that. Emotion lets us understand how to interpret whatever event is going on. We put a certain price or a certain premium on each event that happens. We don't think about it in that way, but we do it. Everything that happens has a value, evaluation. We evaluate whatever's happening. So emotion is like pain. If without pain, we could put our hand over a burning candle and we could smell the flesh burning and not even feel anything about it. Without emotion, anything that happened would be all the same. We would think of a big thing the same way we think of a little thing. If the weather person says it's going to rain today, that's one thing. If the weather person says we're going to have the worst tornado that's ever hit town, then we're going to evaluate that in a different way. That's what emotion does for us. It lets us evaluate in the sense that we experience pain so that we know what's going on in our bodies. Another thing about emotion is light. We can compare emotion to light, for example. If the light in the room goes out, we don't get up trying to find the light. We don't try to find what happened to the light. We try to find out, did the bulb burn out? Did a wire go out? We try to find out what went wrong about it, and we fix that. And when we fix that, then the light takes care of itself. One of the great Scottish Presbyterian preachers, Dr. John Smith, said, take care of your thoughts, and emotion will take care of itself. And it's that simple, really. When we take care of whatever it takes to fix the electrical problem, the light burns. It takes care of itself. So emotion can be compared not only to pain, but it can be compared to light. It can also be compared to a shadow. Not a good comparison, but at least it might help understand emotion. On a sunny day, if you're walking down the street, your shadow goes with you. It follows you. It doesn't matter how fast you go or how fast you stop. Your shadow does exactly what the body does. Your shadow doesn't outrun the body. You don't let the cart get before the horse. You don't have emotion and then think. You think, and then you have the emotion. It all goes together. So it can be compared to a shadow. I've already mentioned the weather. It can even be compared to the weather. We say so-and-so was emotional. Well, what do we say? The weather was hot. It was cold. It was somewhere in between. Burning up. I'm freezing to death. You're saying nothing. You're not explaining anything really. All you're saying is we're having weather. So we always have emotion. Think of emotion as an engine that always runs. It's always idles. It may not be going fast. It may not be going slow. It may not be going anywhere. It may be doing either one. But it always runs. It never shuts down. We are always emotional. And that's the problem people have with it. When to say we're emotional, all of a sudden we cry, or we're sad, or we laugh, or we do something. We're emotional all the time. We just need to get rid of the idea of thinking that we can separate it from thinking, because it can't be done. It's part of thinking. It's also judgmental. That's its job. That's its purpose. That's what emotion is about. We judge things. We compare things. Is this important or is that important? How important is this in relation to that? Emotion lets us figure that out. We couldn't figure it out without emotion. That's why we have emotion. It distinguishes. It helps us differentiate. And it's also connectional. And I cannot overstress this. It's relational. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship between thought and belief. It all kind of goes together. When we think of one, we think of the other. Now, I talk a lot about emotion. It's one of the major themes that I talk about from the time I start a group. I talk about thinking, emotion, and then action. When we change our thinking, our emotion and our action becomes more appropriate. We don't get rid of emotion. We cannot get rid of emotion. It would be impossible to get rid of emotion. We just don't focus on it. I focus on it because I want everybody else to not focus on it. And I tell people constantly, if you're trying to focus on your emotion, then you got the cart before the horse. You cannot do it that way. You have to focus on changing your thinking. When you do that, then everything works itself out. If you take care of your thoughts, you will take care of your emotions.